Okay, let me start the session. So in the last session, we discussed about the varied concept here. So now we'll discuss about the one of the important section called inheritance. Okay, so inheritance basically is one of the object-oriented, the programming principle here. Basically, what we are going to understand. So we're using this particular inheritance here. Okay, so this particular inheritance is going to allow the creation of hierarchical classification. So hierarchical classification is nothing but we are going to create the relation of classes here. So something like we are going to create a multiple classes, and each class we are going to provide the hierarchy of this particular classes here. Okay, for example, here I'm having one class A, and I'm going to create a one more class B here. Whenever I'm trying to create here, these two classes are going to have some relation here. Getting the point? So this relation we are going to make with help of this particular inheritance here. Okay, so this is the one of the important our object oriented the programming principle we are adding here. Getting the point? This is important here. By adding this particular the object oriented principles here, we are going to make the classes here relations here. Okay, this is important. So this section we'll call it as a the classification of this particular hierarchy, how we are having this particular hierarchy. So this class we are going to call it as a subclass, and this particular class we are going to call it as a superclass here. But how we are going to make the relation between these two classes, we have some keywords here. So the first keyword we are going to use extends keyword, and later we'll try to use the one more keyword called implements here. Getting the point? So these are all the important two keywords we are going to use here. Okay, using this particular two keywords, we are going to make the relation between this particular classes and interfaces here. Okay, now whatever the super class we are calling this, the A is our super class and B is our subclass here. So how we are making this particular super and subclass here? With help of this particular two keywords. So first one we'll discuss about the extend, later we'll discuss about the implements keyword. Okay, now what you understand here, this particular information we are going to achieve with help of this particular concept to call inheritance. Okay, so this is very important concept we are discussing here, and we'll try to write the simple example so that we can understand more information how this particular inheritance is going to work. Okay, so let me clear the console, and I'm going to write one package here. Getting the point? To understand clearly, I'm going to write the different packages here, and here I'm going to remove the objects here, and I will write. Okay, so inheritance, and whatever the inheritance information we are having, everything we are going to discuss inside this particular package here. Now I'm creating one class. The name of the class I'm creating A here. Okay, otherwise we can create inheritance. So in A. So in basically here, what is doing here? It is a inheritance here, and this particular class having properties here. So what are all the properties we are having? Into I comma j. Int I comma j. These are all the two properties. Like these are all the two variables we declare here. So once I declare these two variable, along with these two variable, I am going to write method here. So this is very important. Okay, Sai, you need to understand very clearly here. So what I'm trying to explain here. Observe carefully. I define the two variable. So this section we'll call it as a variable here, and this section we'll call it as a method here. Okay, this section we called as a method because we already identified this example from the beginning of this particular class's introduction. Now what I'm doing inside this particular method, so simply I'm printing the statement. I'm not adding any code here. So just we are printing the information what are the I and j values contained here. I and j values. Okay, and here what I'm doing here, I'm trying to provide this I value, and I'm giving the space between this particular I and j. How I'm giving the space? So this is this particular the double quotes here. It is going to give the space between these two particular variables. So what are the two variables we are having? I comma and j. Okay, so this is a class. Now we already identified the inheritance A class. We declare the two variables and we define the one method, something like show ij method. And I'm going to create a one more class here. Here I'm going to create a one more class. So how I'm trying to create this particular classes here. So observe carefully here, inheritance B. Getting the point. This is very important here. This class I'm trying to create inheritance B, and here I'm using the keyword called extend. So carefully observe here. This is the first time we are using the keyword, something like extend. And after using this particular extend keyword, I'm trying to add the name of the class, whatever we declared just now. Okay. So this is the class I'm trying to add. Inheritance A class. Here I'm adding it after this particular extends keyword. So now what you are understanding this diagram. So this is the our superclass we created inheritance A, and we are using the one keyword here, and so here we are trying to create a one more class. So what is the keyword we are using? Extends keyword. Getting the point. This is important, we need to understand. This particular class we will call it as a super class. Why I'm calling this particular class as super? This class cannot extended with any other class. Okay, this class, so whatever the inheritance B class we are creating, this class is extending to this inheritance here. So this particular class we are going to call it as a subclass. So observe carefully, this we are calling as a superclass and this we are calling as a subclass. Now, whenever we are making this particular relation, so what is the relation we are making? This keyword we are using like extends here. Whenever we are using this extends keyword, whatever the information we are having in the superclass, the information we are able to access in the subclass logically. Logically is nothing but, so this particular values will available here. With the help of this particular object, we can call. So whatever the specific property we are having this particular class, as well as whatever the information is available inside this particular class also, we can easily access here. But these values, the inheritance information is available logically. So if you go to the class, you cannot find the information. You cannot find the information, but once you create an object, we can access the superclass information. Okay, so identify very important example we are discussing here, how we are going to create an object here. So inside this particular main method, what I will do here, I'm going to create inheritance B, something like IB. Getting the point, IB, and here now I'm going to use the new keyword and inheritance B I'm going to create. So once I create this, what I will do, this IB dot, so here also we can make small b. Okay, IB dot, now what I'm doing is I'm going to call I value, and the same way IB dot I'm going to call J value, and IB dot the method, whatever the method we defined here, show IJ. Whatever the method we defined just now, these three properties, like these two are the variable and this one is a method. But which object I'm creating it? Now this is important. This is the object I'm creating, inheritance B object. Inheritance B is a what type here? It is a subtype here. Get in the band. So we are creating an object of this particular inheritance B class, but what are all the properties we are accessing it? These two variables are coming from the inheritance A class, because inside the inheritance A only we define this I and J, not in this particular class. In inheritance B, right now we don't have any information. Okay, so whatever the information we define, the information is coming from this particular inheritance A class. Getting the point? The information is coming from this particular inheritance A class. Okay, this is important here. And another important things here. So what is this method? This method also we declare, like we define inside this particular inheritance A, not in inheritance B. Now, so carefully observe, even though even though these three information is not available inside this particular inheritance B class, still we are able to access the information. Okay, how we are able to access the information? Because of this is the relation. How we are making the relation? Here we are using this particular extends keyword. Okay, this is very important here. Okay, now create an object of this particular inheritance B. Now we'll see how we can access the information here. Okay, so any questions regarding this particular diagram? So please first let me know if any have like anyone having any questions this. Okay, so nested classes basically within the class we are going to create another class, but here these two classes are separated. We are not creating any class within this, but if these are the two classes are separately we created, but we are making the relation here with the super and sub. But there is no super and sub, because if I want to create an object, the nested object here, first I'm going to create an outer object. So if I'm not using the outer information, we are not going to create the nested information. But here you can see I'm not using any the outer class in sorry the super class information. So directly I'm trying to create this particular inheritance B information. Okay, I'm trying to create a inheritance B object. So here I'm not using any the superclass information. But whenever I want to create a nested class here, first what we are doing is we are going to create a outer object here. So once a outer object is created, this outer difference. So yesterday we discussed like a outer OU is equals to new outer OU dot. So here with help of new keyword we created the inner classes. Okay, so this is the way of creating the nested object. So basically the nested will have the scope within the one class here, within the one class, whether it is a static class or whether it is a non-static, but everything we are going to define. So those information within the another class here, but here I'm not using any inside the information. So this is a two separate classes. So there is no relation between the like within this particular classes here. But these are the two classes we created separately. And now what I'm doing here, I'm going to make the relation between these two classes using this particular extends keyword here. Getting the point? Whenever we are making the relation, but we are not going to specify the superclass information anywhere to create an object of this particular subclass here. Okay, so the scope also is very important here. The nested class scope is bounded with the outer class here, but here this scope is different. Like inheritance B scope is different and inheritance A class scope is different because these two classes are created in the different locations. Okay, these two classes are created in the different location. Let's observe. So little bit more understanding of that particular nested. So nested basically this is the scope here. Okay, so here we are going to create outer class. Inside the outer class, we are creating the nested scope here. Getting the point. But the super scope is different, and this is the subclass scope. Getting the point. So you can do whatever you want to do here. You can do, and this particular sub also you can do. So now you can create a super object without knowing this particular sub, and here also the sub object we can create without knowing to this particular super. But whenever I want to create this particular inner class, I cannot create without this particular reference of this particular outer. But here I can create a super object without specifying this particular subclass. And here I can create a subclass object without specifying this particular super. So see the scopes are different here. Okay. So this is the scope will contain the outer class, and inside the outer we are having the nested class. And here this is the super class we are having something like inheritance A, and this is the inheritance way. There is no relation between these two, the scopes here. So this scope is different, this particular scope is different. But only what I'm doing is, if I want to access the property sign method which is available inside this particular inheritance A class, now I'm making the relation here. So even though if I'm going to make the relation, but we can create objects separately. We can create an object separately without providing the informations here. Okay, so it's clear. Are any questions? Okay. So could you please respond if anyone having any questions? Yeah, so just understand this example because we'll try to add more information to this particular inheritance. So right now, just we are trying to access the properties which are available in the superclass. So we'll see the different information inside this inheritance. For this example, just you can understand, we are going to provide the properties in the superclass. So those properties we are going to access in the subclass here. Okay. So basically, observe carefully here. Now, what I'm doing here, I'm going to provide the specific property. Okay. This is the one property like it is a variable I'm trying to provide something like int k. Now, observe carefully the method I'm defining, show k method. Okay. And here, what I will do, I will simply print this particular k value. Now you can see whenever I'm trying to print this particular k value, and later what I'm doing here, I'm going to use sum method. Okay, so whenever I'm trying to use this particular sum method, now what I'm doing here, this is important here. Just I'm defining this I plus j plus k. So carefully observe here where we define this I and j. Getting the point? This is important here. Now, if you observe carefully, in the previous example, whenever if I'm not defining the variable information, the compiler will give an error here. The compiler will give an error. But right now you can see inside this particular inheritance B, so I'm defining only one variable here. I'm defining only one variable, something like k. But how this I and j is accessing here? Getting the point? This is important. I and j, how it is accessing inside this particular inheritance B class. So for example, if I'm trying to remove this particular relation. So if I'm trying to remove this particular relation, now observe carefully, we are getting an error here. So line number 10. Now you can see the line number 10, we are getting an error. Why we are getting an error? It's because of, so the below each variable we can easily understand this keyword like I plus j, it is not resolving the variable. The compiler cannot find this particular variable information here. Getting the point? So compiler is not finding this variable. So why it is not finding it? Because there is no relation this particular class right now. It is a normal class. Getting the point? So inheritance A is a normal class and inheritance B is a normal class. So there is no communication to this particular inheritance A to inheritance B here. But when we are going to get the communication, whenever we are using the particular keyword called extends here. Getting the point? This is very important we need to understand. Whenever we are using this particular extends keyword, we can easily understand here. Okay, so now what you need to understand here, now I will add the same extends keyword one more time. And here I'm going to add the same extends keyword. Now whenever I'm adding, the error is resolved here. So finally what I'm doing here I'm going to create main object. So just for understanding, I'm creating a main object in the inheritance B class. But observe carefully, here I'm going to create an object here. Getting the point? Whenever I'm trying to create an object, if I'm here, so if you observe carefully, here, the line number 13, I'm not providing any information. I'm not providing any information regarding the superclasses information. Getting the point? But in the outer related example, how we define here? So this is the object we created in the last section. Getting the point? So outer, this is the way we created. OU dot new inner we created. And here, how we are providing the outer dot inner. Getting the point? In the last example, this is the structure we created whenever we are trying to discuss about the nested classes. But if we observe carefully, if we compare these two object creation, I'm not using any superclasses information here. I'm not using any superclasses information. So directly, I can create an object of this particular subclass without providing the superclass information here. Okay. So now you can see ib dot I value. Now happily, I'm able to access this particular I values here. So the line number 16, I'm trying to initializing the value of this particular I. Basically, where I declare this particular I variable, so this I variable I declare inside this particular inheritance A class. But still now with the help of this particular inheritance B, we are able to access the information here. Okay, so this is important here. Now you can see, so same value I'm able to provide to this particular J variable, and finally I'm going to call this particular show ij method. Okay, now observe carefully. These are all the two values I provided for this particular superclass properties, and this is the superclass method. But only the differences here. Object we created subclass, and we are calling the superclass method. And whenever we are calling this superclass method, now understand here, somewhere we are getting an error. So let's see, remove this. Okay, here I'm going to run this object here. Now you can see I and j values. What are all the values we are getting here? 10, 9 to 20. 10, 9 to 20. Where I provided this particular 10, 9 to 20, here I'm providing line number 69 to 17. But what you need to understand basically. So whenever we are providing this particular I and j values here, the object, what kind of object we created here? So it's like a subclass object. So what you need to understand, this is the heap memory. Okay, inside this heap memory, I created inheritance B object I created. So this inheritance B is going to access with the IB reference variable, and internally, what are all the variable we are having? So basically I and J and OK. These three variables will have, and here these three values right now I'm trying to modify with this I and J 20, and K value by default will be stored as a 0 because I'm not giving any values here. But here the reference is this particular IB. Even though if I'm trying to create a subclass object J, still the I and J values are going to store in the subclass object inside this particular heap memory. But this I and J no longer available to this particular subclass here. Getting the point? This is very important here. But how these objects are available? Logically available here. Logically available inside this particular inheritance B. And what is the variable is physically available? This variable. This int k, this variable is physically available. And these two are the I and J logically available. If I'm trying to open the inheritance B, you cannot find the variable I and J. Okay, so this is important here. Now observe carefully. After this, now what I will do, ib.k. ib.k. So I'm going to give something like a 30. After providing this particular k value, I'm going to call sum method. I'm going to call sum method. Now the same example I'm going to run here. Now you can see I and getting the point. I and j values 10, 20 we are getting. And here what you need to understand here, the particular sum of values. So here I missed to add the one extra braces here to make this particular sum here. Getting the point? This is very important. Now see the output here. So this is the 10, 20, 30. It is appended here. So it is not added the values. Just it is appended the value. Like 10, after the 10 it is appended with the 20. After the 20 it is appended with the 30. So this is not the result of sum of this particular values. But if you observe carefully, the sum of this particular result, it will look like this. Okay, I plus j plus k, the sum of values, something like 60. Getting the point. Now what I'm doing is, these two are the physical values and physical method. Where it is existed? Inside this particular inheritance B. And these three are the logically existed here. So see carefully the comparison between outer classes and this particular inheritance with the super and subclasses here. Okay. So any questions here? Okay. So one more important information I want to provide here. I'm going to create a super information. This is the inheritance EA class I'm trying to create here. Okay. So this class I'm trying to create. So inheritance A created and inheritance B also I created. So using this particular inheritance A, IA dot I value we can provide something like 15 and IA dot J value. Okay. Something like 25 and IA dot the show IJ method we can call. Okay. So this is the super class information. Now I will print with some differentiation here. Okay, this will call it as a sum differentiation. Now you can see how this example are going to work here. Observe carefully. The I and j values is printing 59 to 25. Okay, and the same I and j values are printing 10 comma 20, and this is the sum. So this values are printing with the help of this particular superclass object, and this I and j values are printing with the help of this particular subclass object. And this is the sum method we are calling. Getting the point. So here we are calling the sum method. What you need to understand here. Here I created the superclass information. We are not getting, because inside the superclass only, we are having the I and j values here. Right? Now what you need to understand here. Here I'm going to provide the information. IA dot k. If we observe carefully, if I'm trying to give IA dot k, it is giving me an error. Why it is giving me an error here? Okay, this is important here, because if you see ib dot k, it is not giving me any error, but whenever I'm trying to add ia dot k, it is giving me an error. So not only this, and ia dot sum method also, whenever I'm trying to call ia dot k value, it is giving me an error. And the same way ia dot sum method, whenever I'm trying to call this also, it is giving me an error here. So why this is giving me an error here? Getting the point. So this is basically this hierarchy is important. Now what we are doing is, we are making the relation like this. Okay. So here we are providing the relation. So this is the superclass we provided, and this is the subclass we provided, and here we are having the relation. So relation basically extends, right? And superclass with the subclass we are going to have relation, but subclass with the superclass cannot have a relation. So this will not work. Only this is the information we need to understand. Superclass properties we can inject it into the subclass, but subclass property it's not going to inject it into this particular superclass. Okay, this the way what we are accessing here, this is not applicable here. Only the superclass information we can access into this particular subclass. So this is very, very important here. Okay, and here I'm trying to access the superclass object with the subclass properties. I'm trying to access the superclass object with the subclass properties. So this is not applicable here. Because of that only, these two information we are getting an error. Okay, so this is important we need to understand here. Only superclass information we can access into the subclass. Okay, so this is a way of accessing the even here subclass object we created, and we are able to access the superclass property. It is applicable, and these two sections only it is not applicable. Okay, this is not applicable here. Okay, okay, now what we need to understand here, I plus j plus k equals to 60. Basically, if we observe carefully here what I'm doing here. So here what I'm doing is, now if you observe carefully, I plus j plus k, because here we are doing the addition operations here. Getting the point? Whenever you're doing the addition operation, you need to add this particular extra basis. You need to add extra basis. So for example, if I'm not adding this, if I'm not adding this particular message here, so carefully observe. Now what happening internally? We are getting the 60 value. Getting the point? Here, what happening internally? We are getting the 60 value. So what we are doing here, we are trying to add I value, later we are adding the j value, and here we are adding the k value. So this is the addition here. So because we are adding the plus operator, so it will try to add all the values here. But this is important here, which object we are calling. Here, if we observe ib dot show, ib dot show, and whenever you are calling the ib dot show, what happens internally? It's going to look the I value of this particular inheritance B and the same j value and the k value. So when you are calling this particular sum, it is not going to inject these values. Getting the point? It is not going to inject this particular I and j of superclass object here. Because so here this heap memory is different and this heap memory is different. Here we are trying to providing inheritance A, and here we are trying to provide inheritance B. And inside this inheritance B, I value something like 10 we are providing, j value something like 20 we are providing, and k value something like 30 we are providing. And same way here I value we are providing something like 15, and j value we are providing something like 25. This object is different, this object is different, but here we are calling ib dot sum. ib dot sum. Whenever we are calling the ib dot sum, it will look up this particular values here. Okay, it will look up these are all the values. So for example, if I'm going to print this here, I, and I'm going to print ib. Observe carefully. This is the I am printing, and this is the ib am trying to print. And now observe carefully. These two objects are different. Inheritance A is having the different hash code, and inheritance B it is having different hash code here. Now what you understand here? These two objects are created different location, but these two objects are going to created inside the heap memory only. Getting the point? Heap memory only, but this object is pointed to the different location. Same way, this particular object is also pointed to different locations here. So because of that, so we are going to get this particular sum is different here. Getting the point? Now observe carefully. If I'm going to provide this particular sum in the superclass also, okay, we cannot access this particular k. K basically it is a subclass value. K basically it is a subclass value. And now what I'm doing here, I'm going to run the same example. I'm going to run the same example. Observe carefully here. Here I can call this ia dot sum method. Here I can call ia dot sum method here. But what we need to understand here, observe carefully. Here it is returning 40. Here it is returning 60. So why these two values are different here? Any idea? This is also calling the same sum method, and this is also calling the same sum method. But here we are getting 60, and here we are getting 40. Okay. The answer here only it is providing the information. Answer here only it is providing. So you can see I and j values how much here? So 15 and 25. If I'm going to add this, so we'll get this particular result. But whenever we are calling this 60, basically here we are having three properties. So whenever I'm trying to call this particular sum, here I'm having three properties, I, j, k. And whenever I'm calling this sum here, only two properties, I and j. Getting the point? This is very important here because this sum is going to call superclass sum method, and this particular sum method is going to call the subclass method, because here IB is the object of inheritance B, and here IA is the object of inheritance A. Okay, whenever we are calling these references are important. When you are trying to provide these references here, directly it is look up the object where in the which like inside this particular which class the method is going to call, and here it will call the super sum method, and here it will call the sub sum method. Okay, this is the differences we need to understand. So is it clear? Any questions, Sai? So whenever you are having two more super classes, see basically we'll identify the multiple example with the super classes information. Getting the point? So how we are going to extend this, we'll see. But so don't worry, I will try to explain more information. So for example, if you are having something like S1 is a super one and S2 and S3, but these objects are going to extend into this particular sub. Whether this particular hierarchy is applicable or not, first we need to think. This particular multiple superclasses can we use in the subclass or not? Okay, basically this is not applicable. This is not applicable. Why it is not applicable? Now understand. Here, okay. Now observe carefully. One superclass I am trying to make, and one more superclass I am going to make. For example, this we already discussed the particular box class. Okay, I'm trying to add this particular box class. So observe carefully what happening internally. First, I want to import this. Okay, without adding this box, whenever I'm trying to add this comma, it is not allowing basically. It is not allowing here. So we cannot extend more than one class. Getting the point? So this is, we need to understand whatever you're asking, if we have two more super classes. But basically, in Java, we can extend only one class, but we can implement multiple interfaces. That section we'll see later, but observe carefully. Just I'm giving the like basic information. Whenever you're trying to extend more than one class, it will not allow here. Okay, so extends keyword will allow only one class. Getting the point? So we'll see the simple example on this. So how this particular, the why multiple classes are not going to extend it here. Okay, so just provide me the information regarding this current example. So what we are discussing about this, any questions regarding this inheritance A and inheritance B? So if not, now what I will do, I'm going to explain the member access and inheritance, like how we can access the private information. Okay, so how we can access the private information. So for example, inheritance here, I'm having two variables. Okay, these two are having default access modifier, because if I'm not providing any access modifier here, this will come with a default here. So, but here, what I'm doing here, I'm trying to make this as a private into J. Getting the point? Private into J. So whatever the private variable we are providing, the private variable, it is not going to participate in the inheritance concepts. Getting the point? This is important here. Whatever the private variable we are providing into J, getting the point? These private variables not going to participate in our inheritance. So now what you need to understand here. So whenever I'm trying to access this particular J, getting the point? So earlier we are getting the happily like the result, whatever the result we are expecting. But right now, whenever I'm making this particular J as a private, the J variable I'm not able to access inside this particular inheritance V class. Why I'm not able to access? Because here I made as a private. Whenever I'm making the variable and the methods as a private, those informations are going to access within the same class. Within the same class here. It is not going to allow the inheritance here. Getting the point? This is we need to understand very carefully here. So here we can remove this particular variable. Okay, so this is some restriction we need to understand. Along with this, here also I cannot access the variable, even though this is the same class object. Even though this is the same class object, but still we are not able to initialize this particular value. So what is the best way of initializing the value? The best way of initializing value with methods here, the setters methods here. Getting the point? This is the best way of providing the values with this particular setters here. So now you can see the IB also, it is not accessing this. Along with this, only these two locations, and inside the sum, we are getting an error. Okay, this particular three locations we are getting an error because of I made the variable as a private. So this is very important here. Whenever you are making the variable as well as method. So for example, if I'm going to make show ij, this method also if I'm going to make as a private. Getting the point? So the show ij method, if I'm going to make as a private, now you can see we are getting multiple errors. First here, the j value we are getting, and later I'm getting show ij. This method also we cannot call from the outside of the where the method is specified. It's nothing but the private properties, anything, whatever the variable, methods, constructor, whatever you are making, those informations can access within the same class. If you are trying to access from the outside of the class, you are going to get an error. So this is the simple example. The like a variable I'm getting an error, and the method I'm getting an error. And right now I am going to make constructor also private. Okay, so it should be capital. And I'm making constructor also private. Whenever I'm making the constructor also private, now you can see, so line number 15 also it's giving me an error. The line number 15 is also giving me an error. So this is very important, we need to understand. Even the default constructor also we cannot call whenever we are trying to make as a private. Okay, so any questions regarding this particular private information?
సార్ ఐఏ షో ఐజే ఎందుకు యూజ్ చేస్తున్నారు సార్?
ఎక్కడ లైన్ నెంబర్ చెప్పవా?
20 సార్.
ఇది మెథడ్ ఇక్కడ. సో ఈ మెథడ్ నేను ఇక్కడ డిఫైన్ చేశాను. ఓకే, ఇక్కడ షో ఐజీ అనే ఒక మెథడ్ మనం క్రియేట్ చేసాము. సో ఎర్లియర్ మనం ప్రైవేట్ అనే యాక్సెస్ మాడిఫైర్ మనం యూజ్ చేయలేదు. సో డిఫాల్ట్గా మనం యూజ్ చేసాము. సో దానివల్ల మనం ఇక్కడ హ్యాపీగా యాక్సెస్ చేసాము ఎర్లియర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్. బట్ ఎప్పుడైతే నేను ఇక్కడ ప్రైవేట్ అని యాడ్ చేశానో, ఈ ప్రైవేట్ యాక్సెస్ మాడిఫైర్ ఏం చేస్తానంటే బేసిక్గా ఈ స్కోప్లోనే ఈ లైన్ నెంబర్ 3 నుంచి లైన్ నెంబర్ 17 వరకు ఈ స్కోప్లో మాత్రమే మనం యాక్సెస్ చేయగలుగుతాం. సో ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ ఇక్కడ నేను క్రియేట్ చేశాను అనుకోండి, ఇక్కడ మెయిన్ మెథడ్ క్రియేట్ చేశాను అనుకోండి. ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ ఇయర్ నేనేం చేస్తున్నాను, ఇన్హెరిటెన్స్ ఏ ఐఏ ఈజ్ ఈక్వల్స్ టు న్యూ ఇన్హెరిటెన్స్ ఆబ్జెక్ట్ క్రియేట్ చేశాను. సో ఆబ్జెక్ట్ అబ్జర్వ్ చేస్తే కన్స్ట్రక్టర్ కాల్ అవుతుంది ఇక్కడ. నా కేర్ఫుల్గా చూడు, ఇక్కడ 16 లైన్ నెంబర్లో ఆబ్జెక్ట్ క్రియేట్ చేశాను, కానీ నాకు ఇక్కడ ఏం ఎర్రర్స్ రావట్లేదు. అదే ఆబ్జెక్ట్ నేను ఇక్కడ క్రియేట్ చేశాను 15లో. నా ఐఎమ్ గెటింగ్ అన్ ఎర్రర్ ఇయర్. అర్థమవుతుందా? ఇక్కడ నాకు ఎర్రర్ వస్తుంది. ఎందుకు ఎర్రర్ వస్తుంది అంటే ఈ కన్స్ట్రక్టర్ మన అవుట్ సైడ్ అంటే ఈ క్లాస్ డిఫరెంట్ కదా, ఐఎన్బి అనేది డిఫరెంట్ గా. ఈ ఐఎన్బి అనే క్లాస్లో నేను యాక్సెస్ చేయడానికి ట్రై చేస్తున్నా. ఓకే, అందుకని నాకు ఇక్కడ ఎర్రర్ వస్తుంది. నాకు ఇక్కడ ఏంటంటే సేమ్ క్లాస్ నా ఇఫ్ చూస్తే ఈ స్కోప్ ఇక్కడ ఓపెన్ చేశాను లైన్ నెంబర్ 3లో, నేను లైన్ నెంబర్ 19లో క్లోజ్ చేశా. అంటే విత్ ఇన్ ద సేమ్ క్లాస్, అంటే ఎక్కడైతే నేను క్లాస్ క్రియేట్ చేశానో ఆ సేమ్ క్లాస్లోనే నేను యాక్సెస్ చేస్తున్నాను ప్రాపర్టీస్ని. ఓకే, అందుకని నాకు ఇక్కడ ఎర్రర్ రావట్లేదు. ఓకేనా? సో ప్రైవేట్ ఇన్ఫర్మేషన్ ఈ కన్స్ట్రక్టర్ నేను కాల్ చేస్తున్నాను, ఇక్కడ నాకేం ఎర్రర్ రావట్లేదు. అండ్ తర్వాత ఐఏ డాట్ ఐ వాల్యూ, సో ఐ వాల్యూ నేను 15 ఇచ్చాను, ఐఏ డాట్ జే అనేది 25 ఇచ్చినాను, అండ్ ఐఏ డాట్ సంథింగ్ లైక్ షో మెథడ్, ఈ మెథడ్ కాల్ చేస్తున్నాను. నాకు ఇక్కడ ఏమి ఎర్రర్స్ రావట్లేదు. సో కేర్ఫుల్గా మళ్ళీ చూడు. సో జే అనే ఆ ప్రాపర్టీ ఎర్రర్ రావట్లేదు, అండ్ ఇక్కడ షో జే మెథడ్ ఆల్సో ఎర్రర్ రావట్లేదు. కానీ ఇక్కడ చూస్తే నాకు ఇక్కడ లైన్ నెంబర్ 19లో ఎర్రర్ వస్తుంది, లైన్ నెంబర్ 20లో ఎర్రర్ వస్తుంది. సో ఇక్కడ ఆల్సో నేను సేమ్ చేస్తున్నాను కదా, ఐఏ డాట్ జే 25 ఇచ్చాను, ఐఏ డాట్ షో ఐజే మెథడ్ కాల్ చేస్తున్నాను. ఎందుకు ఇక్కడ ఎర్రర్ వస్తుంది అంటే ఆ వేరియబుల్కి మెథడ్కి నేను ప్రైవేట్ అని ఇచ్చాను. ఇక్కడ ప్రైవేట్ జే వేరియబుల్కి ఇచ్చాను, ప్రైవేట్ మెథడ్కి ఇచ్చాను. ఓకే, ఎప్పుడైతే ప్రైవేట్ యాక్సెస్ మాడిఫైర్ ఇక్కడ యాడ్ చేస్తామో మెథడ్కి అండ్ కన్స్ట్రక్టర్కి వేరియబుల్కి, సో సేమ్ క్లాస్, అంటే సేమ్ క్లాస్ ఎలా స్కోప్ చెక్ చేసుకోవాలి, ఇక్కడ స్కోప్ ఈజ్ ఇంపార్టెంట్. ఓకే, ఈ సేమ్ క్లాస్లో ఈ సేమ్ క్లాస్లోనే అప్లికబుల్. ఎప్పుడైతే మనం వేరే క్లాస్ నుంచి యాక్సెస్ చేయడానికి ట్రై చేస్తామో అక్కడ ఎర్రర్స్ వస్తాయి. ఓకే, దిస్ ఈజ్ వెరీ ఇంపార్టెంట్ హియర్. బేసికలీ ఇయర్ మనం ఇక్కడ ఏం చేస్తున్నామంటే రెస్ట్రిక్ట్ చేస్తున్నాము. outside of the class we are not giving the permission to allow this particular properties here. Okay, this is one of the principle of this particular oops here. So this is, we'll call it as a encapsulations here. Properties basically we are going to make as a private here. ఏవైతే మనం వేరియబుల్స్ డిక్లేర్ చేసామో ఐ అండ్ జే, ఈ ఐ అండ్ జేని బేసిక్గా ఆ ప్రాపర్టీ లైక్ వేరియబుల్స్ని వీఆర్ గోయింగ్ టు మేక్ యాజ్ ఎ ప్రైవేట్. అండ్ ఈ వేరియబుల్స్ని ఎలా యాక్సెస్ చేస్తాము అంటే త్రూ ద మెథడ్స్ హియర్. ఓకే, సో దిస్ ఈజ్ ఇంపార్టెంట్ హియర్. ఆ మెథడ్స్ ఎలా జనరేట్ చేస్తున్నాను, ఓకే, ఆ మెథడ్స్ ఎలా జనరేట్ చేస్తున్నాను అంటే ఇక్కడ చూస్తే సోర్స్కి వెళ్ళి గెటర్స్ అండ్ సెటర్స్ హియర్. నౌ ఐఎమ్ గోయింగ్ టు సెలెక్ట్ దీస్ టు, ఈ విధంగా నేను సెలెక్ట్ చేసుకుంటున్నాను. ఓకే, సో ఇక్కడ చూస్తే గెట్ ఆఫ్ ఐ మెథడ్ ఒకటి, సెట్ ఐ మెథడ్, అండ్ సేమ్ వే గెట్ ఆఫ్ జే మెథడ్ ఒకటి అండ్ సెట్ ఆఫ్ జే. అండ్ ఇక్కడ ఈ మెథడ్స్ ఏం చేశానంటే పబ్లిక్ పెట్టాను. ఇక్కడ చూస్తే పబ్లిక్ ఉంది, అన్ని మెథడ్స్కి పబ్లిక్ ఉంది. బట్ ఇక్కడ వేరియబుల్స్కి ప్రైవేట్ చేశాను, ఈ వేరియబుల్స్కి ప్రైవేట్ చేశాను. ఎందుకు ప్రైవేట్ చేశానంటే డైరెక్ట్లీ వేరియబుల్ని యాక్సెస్ చేయడానికి ఆప్షన్ లేకుండా నేను ప్రైవేట్ చేశాను. ఓన్లీ ఈ క్లాస్లో మాత్రమే, ఎక్కడైతే ఈ క్లాస్ ఉందో ఈ క్లాస్లో మాత్రమే యాక్సెస్ చేస్తాము, బయట క్లాస్లో యాక్సెస్ చేయము. సో మనం ఇప్పుడు యాక్సెస్ చేయాలి అంటే ఈ ఐ అండ్ జే వాల్యూస్ని యాక్సెస్ చేయాలి అంటే మాడిఫై చేయాలన్నా సెట్ చేయాలన్నా అప్డేట్ చేయాలన్నా ఏమైనా చేయాలంటే ఈ మెథడ్ని వాడతాం. ఓకే, సో దిస్ ఇస్ ఆల్రెడీ డిస్కస్, దిస్ డాట్ ఐ ఈక్వల్స్ టు ఐ. ఇక్కడ ఈ పారామీటర్కి వాల్యూస్ ఇస్తాము. సో ఈ వాల్యూ ఈ వేరియబుల్కి సెట్ అయిపోతుంది. సేమ్ వే ఇక్కడ జే, ఈ జే వాల్యూని ఇక్కడ సెట్ చేస్తాము కాల్ చేసే మెథడ్ని, అండ్ ఇలా సెట్ చేస్తాము. సో నా ఇప్పుడు చూస్తే నేను ఈ మెథడ్ని ప్రైవేట్ తీసేస్తాను, కన్స్ట్రక్టర్ కూడా పబ్లిక్ చేసేస్తాను. ఎందుకంటే కన్స్ట్రక్టర్ షుడ్ బి పబ్లిక్, ఎందుకంటే ఆబ్జెక్ట్ క్రియేట్ చేస్తున్నాం కాబట్టి అది పబ్లిక్లో ఉండాలి. ఓకే, అండ్ ఈ వాల్యూస్ డైరెక్ట్ నేను యాక్సెస్ చేయలేకపోతాను. ఇన్స్టెడ్ ఆఫ్ కాలింగ్ దిస్ ఐ నేనేం చేయొచ్చు ఇప్పుడు, సో ఇక్కడ సెట్ ఐ వాల్యూ, సో ఇక్కడ ఏం చేస్తున్నాను అదే 15ని ఇక్కడ నేను సెట్ చేస్తున్నాను. ఓకే, అదే 15ని ఇక్కడ సెట్ చేస్తున్నాను. అండ్ ఇక్కడ ఏం చేస్తున్నాను అంటే జే బదులు డైరెక్ట్లీ మెథడ్ కాల్ చేస్తున్నాను. ఓకే, సో దిస్ ఇస్ ద వే ఆఫ్ కాలింగ్ ద మెథడ్ అండ్ సెట్టింగ్ ద వాల్యూస్ హియర్. getting the point. It is important. Now you can see here set చేస్తాను, ఐ వాల్యూ సెట్ చేస్తున్నాను, జే వాల్యూ సెట్ చేస్తున్నాను. బట్ ఎలా సెట్ చేస్తున్నాను, బై కాలింగ్ దిస్ మెథడ్ సెట్ ఐ మెథడ్, సెట్ జే మెథడ్. ఓకే, డైరెక్ట్లీ వేరియబుల్ నేను యాక్సెస్ చేయట్లేదు. ఇప్పుడు ఇక్కడ వేరియబుల్ని యాక్సెస్ చేయట్లేదు. ఇక్కడ ఆల్సో సేమ్ set I method. Okay, and set J method. అండ్ సో దీనికి కూడా మన ఈ కే వాల్యూ కూడా మనం ఏం చేయొచ్చు, సో దానికి కూడా ఒక మెథడ్ జనరేట్ చేసేసి ఆ మెథడ్ని కాల్ చేయొచ్చు. బట్ రైట్ నౌ ఐఎమ్ నాట్ డూయింగ్ ఎనీథింగ్, సో స్టిల్ సమ్వేర్ ఐఎమ్ గెటింగ్. ఓకే, ఇక్కడ ఐ అండ్ జే ఐఎమ్ గెటింగ్ ఎన్ ఎర్రర్. సో ఇఫ్ యు ఆర్ గెటింగ్ ఎన్ ఎర్రర్, నౌ వాట్ వీ కెన్ డూ, సింప్లీ గెట్ మెథడ్, గెట్ ఐ ప్లస్ గెట్ జే. ఓకే, ఇలా కాల్ చేయాలి. Get ij, I method I'm calling here, and j method I'm calling. Whenever I'm calling this, what happens internally, it will go to this I method. ఇక్కడ ఈ I method కాల్ అవుతుంది, దాని తర్వాత I వాల్యూ రిటర్న్ అవుతుంది. ఇక్కడ కేర్ఫుల్ గా చూస్తే I అని, ఈ I ఎక్కడ డిఫైన్ చేశాను, ఇక్కడ డిఫైన్ చేశాను. లైన్ నెంబర్ 4 లో డిఫైన్ చేశాను, అండ్ లైన్ నెంబర్ 20లో వాల్యూ సెట్ చేస్తున్నాము. లైన్ నెంబర్ 17లో ఏదైతే వాల్యూ సెట్ చేశానో ఆ వాల్యూస్ ని రిటర్న్ చేస్తున్నాను. అర్థమవుతుందా? ఏదైతే వాల్యూని సెట్ చేస్తానో ఆ వాల్యూస్ ని రిటర్న్ చేస్తున్నా. ఇప్పుడు ఈ క్లాస్ ఏదైతే ఇన్హెరిటెన్స్ ఏ క్లాస్ మనం డిఫైన్ చేశామో ఈ క్లాస్ ఒక ప్రిన్సిపల్ ను ఫాలో అవుతుంది, మన ఆబ్జెక్ట్ ఓరియంటెడ్ ప్రిన్సిపల్ ని ఫాలో అవుతుంది. సో దాట్ విల్ కాల్ ఇట్ యాజ్ ఎ ఎన్క్యాప్సులేషన్ హియర్. Encapsulation, basically we are going to make variable as a private, and if I want to access the variable information directly, we'll go for this particular methods here. చూస్తే నేను ఇన్హెరిటెన్స్ బిలో అన్ని మెథడ్స్ కాల్ చేస్తున్నాను, కానీ ఎక్కడ నేను వేరియబుల్ని యూజ్ చేయట్లేదు. ఇప్పుడు సో నాకు ఎక్కడ చూసుకున్నా అన్ని మెథడ్స్ ఉంటాయి ఇంకా. ఓకే, సో దిస్ ఈజ్ ఇంపార్టెంట్ హియర్. ఓకే, సో అర్థమైందా? ఇంకేమైనా క్వశ్చన్స్ ఉన్నాయా? Then how to access means where we use the getters in superclass or subclass. Okay, so can you explain your questions for them? So I could not understand what you are trying to explain. Okay, so if it is clear, it's fine. Now what I will do, this is the simple example we discussed here. Now we'll move on to the one of the practical example. Practical example, basically what I will do, I will copy the box example what we used in the previous example, where it is, I think here. I'm going to copy the box example into this particular inheritance. Okay, so now you can see what we define inside this particular box class. So we are making all the variable as a private here, and now we are having some 3 parameters constructor, default constructor, and public. Like we have some different constructors and methods we are having. Okay, now what I'm doing here, I'm going to provide the inheritance functionality to this particular class here. So I'm going to provide the inheritance information to this particular class. Okay, observe here, we are already aware of this particular example like a box. Now I'm going to create one more class here. Now I'm going to create one more class, something like box weight here, and this particular box weight is going to extends with box class. Now observe carefully what happening internally. Whatever the box weight class we are creating, this particular class now it is extended with this particular box class. Now whenever it is extended, all the properties, what are all the properties we are having, what are all the properties we are having inside this particular class, we can access, like we can logically access into this particular box weight. Okay, so that we already identified. Now what I'm doing here, I'm going to make private something like a double one variable I'm declaring. So what is the name of the variable? It is something like weight, and here I'm going to create a constructor. So I'm trying to create one default constructor. This is important. I'm trying to create the default constructor, and along with this particular default constructor, I will print the statement here. Okay, this is the default constructor, but I'm not going to use this default constructor. We are going to call the parameters constructor. So I will define the same constructor, public box weight, and this will use this particular w, something like width, height, w, weight. Okay, so these are all the parameters. And now if you observe carefully, these three parameters we are going to call the superclass parameters here, and this is the last one we are trying to initialize into this particular weight variable. Okay, but how we are defining the all the variables here? With a comma. Okay, this is important here because this example we already discussed in the previous example. Now what I'm doing here? Here I'm going to call one method like that's something like set values. So using this particular set values, I'm going to set like this: width, height, and depth here. Okay. Internally, what I'm doing here, I'm calling the set values method. So this particular set values method, what it will do internally, it will try to set the three properties: width, height, and depth. This example we already discussed here. So I don't want to discuss one more time. And finally, so here what I'm doing here, this dot weight is equals to weight here. Okay. So this is the way I'm trying to set the values here. Getting the point. This is the way I'm trying to set this particular values here. So now what we need to understand here. Here I'm going to create one main class here. Here I'm going to create a main class. So what exactly this particular main class will do? It will try to create box and box weight main. So this is the some bigger name I'm using because by seeing the name of this particular class, we can easily understand what this particular class will do here. Okay. Now what I'm doing is I'm going to create an object of this particular box weight here, something like BW, and new I'm going to create a box weight. How many constructors we are having inside this particular box weight? Two constructors we are having. First one is a default constructor and second one is a parameterized constructor. Okay. Now I'm calling the parameterized constructor. Width I'm going to set as a 15.1, and I will try to set this something like 25.2, and depth I'm going to set 35.3, and the weight property I'm going to set 45.4. Okay, this is the way of calling this particular constructor that we already identified in the earlier example. Okay, so one object I'm creating, and another object I'm going to create here, something like BW1 and BW2. BW is nothing but box weight, and here I'm going to set as a something like a 17, 27, 37, and 47. Okay, this is the another example. Now what I will do here, I'm going to call the volume here. So here I'm going to call the volume. So this is very important, we need to understand. Now what I'm doing here, I'm going to declare the one variable something like VOL, and what I'm doing here, BW1 dot volume method. So this volume method I'm trying to store into this particular VOL. So I think it is not returning it directly. We are trying to print the value. B1 dot volume I'm calling, and B1 BWT dot to volume. So here I think we can remove this. I thought the value method is returning some value. Now it is not returning. So carefully observe. If I'm going to run this example, default constructor it is calling internally. Okay, and now what I'm doing, the volume we are trying to print here. So which default constructor it is calling? Which default constructor it is calling? Getting the point. This is important here. Why this particular default constructors are calling? Because here what we are doing internally, we are trying to call the parameterized constructor. So observe box weight default constructor, and here this is the box default constructor. Getting the point? This is the box default constructor I'm calling. Instead of calling this particular set of values, now basically we are going to use the super here. Getting the point? So as of now, don't worry regarding this particular super. I will try to explain this particular super keyword, how it is going to work. But what you need to understand here, if I'm going to run this example one more time, so now you can see it is calling parameter constructor. It is calling parameters constructor. Why it is printing 2 times? Why it is printing 2 times? Because here we are trying to create a 2 objects here. Getting the point? Here we are trying to print the 2 object. But now what you need to understand basically, so for object creation, where we define this particular volume method, this volume still it is available inside this particular box class. So this is the volume method. Getting the point? This is the value method is calling here. Getting the point? But which object we are creating? The volume we define inside this particular box class, but object we are creating the box weight class. Getting the point? With help of this particular box weight class, now we are trying to call the volume method. Now, so if I'm going to override the same method, override is nothing but I'm trying to define this particular same method, but directly we cannot access this particular variables here. Directly we cannot access this particular variables here. Now what we need to understand here, so instead of accessing this variable, we have a methods here, get width method. Getting the point? And here get height method and get depth method. Okay, this is the method we are having, and we can call this. And finally I'm trying to add this particular weight also. So sorry, not to place here, we need to multiply this, then only we are going to get the volume of this particular box weight here. Okay, this is very important. Now you need to understand here. Okay, this is very important. Now you need to understand basically. So this volume I'm going to write box weight volume is, box weight volume is, and box weight default constructor. And this default constructors are not calling, and all the parameters constructors are calling. Here you can see this is a parameters constructor, but here box of parameters constructor. Okay, this particular constructor I'm making as a box so that we can easily understand which constructor it is calling. Now see the differences here. So see the differences here. Box parameters constructor it is calling, and here box weight volume it's calling. Now it is calling box weight parameter. So box weight volume method. Earlier it is not called the box weight. It is directly called this particular value method, which is resides inside the box class. So see the differences here. Even though the same method is already existed in the box class, but which method is taking the highest priority here? The method is taking the highest priority of this particular box weight here. Now you can see the message. By seeing this message, we can easily understand which volume method is calling. So this is the box weight volume is. So here only we define the message. But inside this particular box class, so just we define the volume is. I did not add any box weight message inside the box class. Now what you understand here, whenever I'm trying to call this volume method, whenever I'm trying to call this particular volume method, now it is taking the highest priority of the box weight class. Earlier it was taken the box class volume method. So this is the differences we need to understand. Why we need to understand? Because why the box weight is taking the highest priority? Because what is an object we are creating? Something like box weight. For example, if I'm going to create this box is equals to new box, if I'm going to provide the 3 parameters, something like 45.7 and 96.8 and so 56 dot something like 3. Okay, so if I'm going to provide this object something like a box, and box dot, if I'm going to call volume. So see the information. Now you can see the information how it is going to call. Volume is. Okay, this is the volume is. Now here box weight volume is. So see the differences here. So this is the box weight volume is calling, and the last one it's calling the box class volume. It is calling the box class value. Getting the point. This is very important here. Based on the object. Based on the object is if the method is available in the same class, it is going to take highest priority. If the method is not available, it will look up the superclass. But here, what you need to understand here, for this particular object, like for this particular box, so what is a superclass? For this particular box, what is a superclass here? So right now we don't have any superclass, but logically, this particular class is going to extend object to class. Getting the point? So this particular class, now it is going to extend object to class. This particular object class we already discussed here. Logically, it is going to exist, but not physically. But here, box weight. Getting the point? Here, the box weight is physically existed here. Box weight is physically extending from this particular box class here. But this particular box class logically is extending from the object class. Getting the point? If any class does not have any superclass, all the classes directly or indirectly is extending from this particular object class. Okay, so this is, I want to give you the information regarding the basic inheritance. So any questions? Anyone having any questions here? ఓకే. సాయి నీకేమైనా క్వశ్చన్స్ ఉన్నాయా? Okay. So if we don't have anything, now I'm going to stop the session here. We'll continue tomorrow. Tomorrow we are going to discuss the how we can provide the superclass information with the subclass object here. Okay. So this is also one of the important concept we are going to discuss tomorrow, and we are going to use the super keyword. So so we'll try to continue the inheritance information tomorrow as well. Okay. We'll continue tomorrow.